Appreciate you clicking on this video. I got the chance to watch Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, and with this sequel to Godzilla Vs Kong, we follow Kong alone now in Hollow Earth. Everything for him seems to be going just fine until he stumbles upon a society of apes just like him, ruled by one mad crazy kaiju named Scar King. From here, Kong will attempt to free his people while also needing the help of a once enemy named Godzilla. That's all pretty much everything. Any spoilers, you guys? This will be a spoiler-free review. We got a sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong. That is an achievement in of itself, because we still have to look back at the history of this franchise. One, not only is it a miracle that the monsterverse is pretty successful, today in the movie industry, I think more cinematic universes fail than actually succeed, but the monsterverse was doing pretty alright for itself to the point that they got to their crossover movie. It just sucks their film got released during a time where theaters were basically closed. And that seems like they for sure missed out on their potential grossings for what the movie could have been if things were normal. And well, as far as the film itself, I enjoyed it. It for sure was not a perfect movie. It still had narrative issues, an uninteresting human story, and well, for Godzilla fans specifically, too much focus on Kong. But for me, I found it to be very entertaining. I love the way they went about having these two legends fight one another and eventually even team up to take down Mechagodzilla. So I was actually super excited to find out they'd be doing this again, except this time they would be teaming up from the start to fight a bigger threat. But nothing could have prepared me for what those trailers look like. Kong wielding an infinity gauntlet, Godzilla turning pink. The cartoony, zany vibe of this universe just went up. Some don't love it, but I was all there for it. So that's really the only expectation I had going into Godzilla X Kong The New Empire, is just give me a good time. Don't let me think too much about how dumb and zany things have gotten, and just take me on a wild ride. And boy, whoa! Godzilla X Kong was a freaking blast, man. Now, don't get me wrong, it's got its negatives, and I'll get into that in a sec, but this year for movies has not been all that great. A lot of lackluster films, a lot of movies where I just left the theater going, eh. And aside from Dune 2, this is the first time I walked out of the movie going, how quickly can I buy another ticket to see this movie again? Starting off with the positives for me, I think Adam Wingard leaned into the right direction for where to go with this universe. While I've seen the complaints online that people feel like things got a little too cartoony, a little too goofy, Godzilla shouldn't be sprinting like he's a member on the high school track team, for me it only really enhanced my enjoyment and put itself in what it's supposed to be. I mean, this is Godzilla and Kong teaming up. Is there a version of this movie you can make where things are dead serious, the tone is dark, and these are essentially animals with very little human characteristics? Sure. But I feel like that really puts Godzilla and his monsters inside a box and not much room to grow. Godzilla has had decade-long careers, and this movie really highlights the Showa era of Godzilla films. Movies that were a little bit lighthearted, a little bit more silly, campy. Some might want to make the obvious comparisons to Godzilla Minus One and go, look, we just had a Godzilla movie that won an Oscar. I don't think that should be used to counter-argue the quality of Godzilla X Kong. If anything, that should just be used to show you the wide spectrum of films Godzilla can have. His movies can literally go from being over-the-top silly, goofy, and still enjoyable, while also producing films that can land him in the Oscar category. Both these kind of movies can coexist. Personally, for me also, I also love that Kong is still essentially the main kaiju of these movies. For obvious reasons, he's just the most easiest to be able to portray some sort of human emotion. And that comes really handy when this movie is about 50% kaijus on screen. There's a lot of drawn out silent sequences where there's no dialogue, not a lot of talking, but you're just following the movements and expressions of Kong as we see his daily life in Hollow Earth and interacting with other kaijus. And those were honestly my favorite moments of this movie. Seeing Kong be by himself, take a shower, get his lunch, and even when he comes face to face with this new society of apes, because man, Zuko was a real hit. The start of their relationship begins off a little rocky, but through the progression of the movie, they get closer and closer, they learn to trust each other, and just really the entire Kong and Zuko dynamic I was all in for. I thought it was not only sweet, it was funny, but it gave the movie a lot of heart, and I think that's what helps elevate it from just being a mindless blockbuster. The movie doesn't forget we go to see these movies because we love these giant monsters. And maybe it's a little silly for me to say, but there were genuine moments where I could feel a swell of tears coming up. And all of that is in big tribute to the way Adam Wingard handles the arc that Kong goes through in this movie. But like I said, at the end of the day, this is still kind of a mindless blockbuster, and boy, are the action sequences not only packed, there are several of them. Kong not only gets gets a ton of sequences to showcase his intelligence, but why he's a brooding force. Godzilla is sprinkled all throughout this movie and is even given his own action sequences. Both of these legends each get several different monsters to fight throughout the course of this movie before you even get to Scar King and Shimo. And well, by the time you just get to that third act where it's pure monster mayhem, you are eating up every little second. I was even impressed with some of the fight sequences in here. I'm not gonna say they were like well choreographed, but a lot of them felt like wrestling moves. Really just a blast of a time. I can't tell you how big I was smiling through the course of this movie, just feeling so giddy and happy inside, going, look at this. This is cinema, baby. So on that note, let me go into some of the things I'm mixed to negative about where they could still kind of improve the things going on in the monsterverse. This time around, I am happy to say that it feels like they found a real balance in where they just get the human stuff as quickly out of the way as possible. With this movie having a lot more time dedicated to just the monsters on screen, the human subplot isn't as annoying or frustrating as other entries. If anything, I would say this is the most fast-paced it's ever been. Every time a human comes on screen, say what they need to, get across the exposition, and then we're right back into the monsters. And while I really appreciated that, and heck, I'm even willing to say there wasn't one human character I was completely annoyed with going, dude, get them off the screen. I thought all of them did a great job, from Brian Tyree Henry being included back in here, adding some comedy to the film. Dan Stevens was a very charming, lovable character. Rebecca Hall as well, having this mother-daughter relationship with Kaylee Hoddle. Not a nuisance at all, enjoyable, but it feels like the movie still wants to try and include the humans as part of the big monster titan fights, and that's where it could start to feel a little off the rails. Now, some people will be conflicted on that because the human involvement leads to like a big surprise, a little cameo of a certain monster that maybe some of you are expecting, and it's very crucial for the humans to be part of this story for that to happen. Not to mention also the upgrades they give Kong, from his new tooth to his robotic arm, and sometimes just that kind of stuff feels so contrived and there for conveniences, and it isn't very well fleshed out, and that's what leads to the movie sometimes feeling a lot more silly and unserious than it needs to be. For my Godzilla fans, apologies, but yeah, Godzilla feels almost like an afterthought in this movie. Don't get me wrong, the big boy is still given plenty of awesome moments, and in fact, the way they pace him in the story, he's in it from beginning to end, even if it's like 30-second sequences at a time. But even at the end of the movie, you still very much feel like Godzilla was just a side quest to this story, was someone that they could have easily put in or out of this movie. And that was the rumors we were hearing for the longest time, that this wasn't going to be a team-up movie, that it was just going to be another solo King Kong movie. But when developing the movie, they found a way to put Godzilla in there, and it very much feels that way. To me, it's not that big of an issue because, like I said, King Kong is still my preferred Titan, but I know there's Godzilla fans that are like, boy, we need some respect. Why can't Godzilla be the main character? Another kind of big negative for me is Scar King and just the handling of the main villains in general. They're actually introduced in the movie a lot later than I thought they would, and they also just don't feel like a large part of it. One of my fears with Scar King kind of came to fruition, where I was like, he doesn't really feel like a threat. He just feels like a pathetic, balding chimpanzee, and unfortunately, I did get that feeling sometimes throughout the movie. Now, there's still a lot of things I did end up liking about Scar King. I felt like at times, yes, his evil presence was felt. You can see that this was a mad, sadistic dude from his walk, his fighting style, but ultimately, he just didn't feel like the big threat I was hoping for. In fact, it's more of who he controls in this movie that makes him a big threat. And I guess when I look at it that way, I can accept Scar King more, when I'm like, well, yeah, he isn't the muscle threat I was hoping for, but intelligence-wise, our heroes have never really faced a villain like that has a brain, that has an army. He just also feels underutilized. And really, those were just the biggest things. Other than it just getting a lot sillier and wacky, which I was willing to accept, all the issues I had with Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire are just overshadowed by how fun and entertaining this film is. Like, this is a perfect example for me of a movie that is very flawed, has issues, but when you're just watching a movie and having a good time, laughing, seeing some monsters fight, cool sequences, fun ideas, you just let go of some of those issues and don't let them bother you. So for Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, I'm gonna give action 4 stars. I think people are still gonna be surprised by the amount of kaiju fights you're about to get, both from Godzilla and Kong, not to mention just the all-out war that goes down in the third act. Commenting the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I found this one to be really funny. There's a lot of slapstick humor, but Brian Tyree Henry and Dan Stevens were also vital in providing a lot of the laughs. Drama in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. Again, the movie would have probably have just been fine and enjoyable with a mindless violence and monsters just fighting each other, a bunch of CGI noise on screen, but Kong being the heart of this movie and the relationship he forms with Zuko, plus the arc he goes through in this film, all of it just helped elevate this story and actually make me form an emotional connection to it. Horror in the movie, I'll give 1.5 stars. There are some creepy monsters and unsettling sequences when it comes to Scar King and other creatures lurking in Hollow Earth. Nothing too major, but maybe for small kids, they might get a little frightened. And suspense in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. There were moments where I'm like, dang, how are they gonna get out of this? What's about to happen to my boy Kong? Is Godzilla gonna be okay? And I think a lot of that was, again, because of the emotional connection that was set up. Casual moviegoers, I'm gonna give this an A+. It's just a blockbuster entertaining film. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it an A-. And critically, I'm going to give it a B+. I really enjoyed my time with Godzilla Vs Kong: The New Empire, and I think it's worth adding to your collection at home.
That's a keeper. Yes.
Please go see this in theaters. I saw it in IMAX. I'm planning to go see it again tonight. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on the movie. I do plan to do a spoiler review. No post-credit or mid-credit scene, so you can just skip through that. But the director has said he has ideas for the third film. We gotta speculate to what that could be. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.